for us, please. Thank you. Well, hello everyone, and a very warm welcome to the launch of the new Leadership for Sustainability Research Interest Group, or the LFS RIG. We're delighted that you could join us today as we begin building a space for critical, creative, and collaborative, so all the C's, thinking about what educational leadership needs to look like in response to climate emergency, biodiversity loss, and growing social inequalities. This group brings together researchers, practitioners, and students who are passionate about reimagining leadership for people, place, and of course the planet, using approaches like systems thinking, regenerative practice, and justice-oriented leadership. So I'd like to thank you for being part of this very important conversation. Okay, here's a quick look at what we've got planned for today. We'll start by giving a short overview of what the RIG is all about and its purpose, focus, and potential. Then the four conveners will introduce themselves, and then next we'll want to hear from you, who you are, what brings you here. We'll then spend a bit of time exploring how we define sustainability before moving into a short breakout activity, or depending on the size of the group, it may be a whole group activity. But that's to get us thinking and connecting with each other. Finally, we'll share some plans for the year ahead, followed by time for questions and open discussion. So once again, thank you for joining us this evening. So we really are excited to formally introduce you to the LFS RIG. We've been working behind the scenes for a little while now, so to have this formal launch is very exciting. The strapline, Reimagining Educational Leadership for People, Place and Planet, reflects our core purpose to ask bold questions, and that's something that discussions the co-conveners have been really keen on, about what leadership in education looks like when we take the climate emergency, biodiversity loss, and so on, when we take it seriously. So as a RIG, we're a growing community, and hopefully we're going to be growing a lot more over the coming years. And the community with people who are passionate about understanding how educational leadership can be a powerful force for that environmental, social, and economic transformation. We're interested in frameworks like systems thinking and regenerative approaches. And I suppose not just tweaking current models, but rethinking how educational leadership across all sectors can be more responsive, ethical, and future-facing. We explore how leadership connects with climate action, equity, and the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, and how these can be integrated into leadership practices and educational policy. So ultimately, this group is about generating ideas, research, and sharing that research alongside practice that responds to the scale and, of course, the urgency of the challenges that we face. It's about building the community, which is, again, like I've already said, why we're so glad that you're here today. Oops. Okay, so just now, very briefly, as co-conveners, and I do mean we're going to give you a very brief introduction to ourselves before we turn our attention over to you. So, David, would you like to start us off?
Thanks, Marie. I'm David Dixon. I was a head teacher, primary head teacher of 3 primary schools over a 20-year period of time, hence all my grey hairs, which have got even greyer since that picture was taken. Because had an environmental education background, then when I became head, wanted to put sustainability at the heart of everything that we did in school, in terms of the curriculum, the campus, and the community. Following headship, I've been trying to develop other leaders along the same lines, and I've run workshops for leadership groups and also curriculum development with groups of schools.
Thank you, David. Rupert, over to you.
Thanks, Marie. So my name's Rupert Hyam. I'm an associate professor at UCL's Centre for Educational Leadership. A while ago now, I worked for a few years as a secondary school English teacher and moved into academia because I felt schooling doesn't address some of the most important issues and skills that young people will need to shape their lives. And I wanted to explore how we can challenge and support them to express their values in practice. As a researcher, I've studied educational dialogue and values-led school improvement, student leadership over the years, but since around 2020 or just before, I've increasingly tried to tie those together to explore this question of how we can support young people to respond intelligently and humanely to the civilizational threats that we face. Recently, I've worked with colleagues to explore what educational leadership should look like in the Anthropocene, which is a concept we may explore later today. I've also explored head teachers' reflections on leading education for sustainability in their schools. And in that research, we were surprised by the size of the gap between their sense of moral responsibility around this issue and their sense as professionals of not having the permission to take it as seriously as they believe is needed. And I'd like to feed this sort of research and other into the conversations in this new rig, and to work with others to create new opportunities.
Thank you, Rupert. Nahida, before we come over to you, because you've got a little extra something special for us tonight, I'm going to just jump in first. So I'm Marie Beresford-Day, and I'm a senior lecturer at the University of Dundee up in Scotland. I live in North Yorkshire in England, so I'm bridging the two areas. My background started off in early years and primary education. I then qualified after getting my natural sciences degree as a secondary science teacher, then moved to Scotland where I picked up the educational leadership and management, and that's kind of threaded through in my master's and then into my PhD. So throughout my work, it is specifically in the field of educational leadership, but it does have a particular focus on sustainability, particularly in terms of my research. And throughout my higher education studies, from my bachelor's degree through to my PhD, I focused on either the natural sciences or educational leadership, but with a common thread of complexity theory running through. And it's that complexity theory that I think really links in very well to environmental sustainability and sustainability beyond that. My work explores creativity and innovation and how leadership in education can respond meaningfully to the different crises, whether that be climate, social justice, economic, and so on, and the need for more regenerative, future-facing practices, not just in theory, but in the day-to-day realities of education systems. I'm especially interested in how leaders can navigate complexity, enable that collaboration, and challenge the dominant metrics-driven culture to lead for the people, place, and planet. So it's a real privilege to be part of launching this research interest group. So I'm excited to connect with you all as we move forward. Nahida, over to you.
Thank you, and thank you for your patience, because it's very challenging being part of the rig to fit it all in. But anyway, it's complex. So I've been ahead in Lewisham for over 2 decades, and we're working hard really to develop a community rooted in belonging, justice, and hope. We've really tried to, and we continue to try and make sure that sustainability, or learning to live sustainably, is not a bolt-on, but it's very much part of what we do. It runs through our curriculum as a golden thread, through people leadership, community conversations, but it's very much an ongoing journey. Many of our families face real and immediate challenges. If it's not insecure housing, mental health, it's economic hardship. But we believe that deepening our collective understanding of sustainability is obviously good, vital for the planet, but it's profoundly good for all of us. It strengthens our sense of agency, builds solidarity, and helps us all crucially imagine and create a fairer and more hopeful future. And then can I show the clip?
Let me
This is
just-
something the children have been involved in recently, so I'm going to share it with you. Can we see that?
Yes, that's great. Thank you.
I love nature and it makes me feel really happy and warm inside. I noticed loads of bees on the flowers and it made my heart really happy.
In my garden, to me, it feels like plants and bugs are friends and they need each other.
What happened to all the insects? Because why have they gone? What happened to them? Oh, where are all the bugs? Like, why have they come in? Like, where are they? We just put an habitat took a buildings in, and I think we also just put the places they live. What happens if your feed was had chemicals in that you can eat? It's their habitat, and they don't want to leave it.
The bugs and animals in this world, we would have half of what we have today.
It's like humans' houses. What happens if bugs started jumping on your houses?
Pollinators are essential and they're not to be underestimated.
I think it's everyone's job to help protect pollinators because pollinators are just important as everything and everyone else in this world. They do a lot for us that we don't really realise. And they're really important to us and our ecosystem.
We've done so much damage that we need to fix what we've done.
So I think it's our job to make things right. Kids should be involved too. Just because I was small doesn't mean I did.
That was amazing, Nahida. Thank you very much for that. It's just so powerful, isn't it, to hear from voices of our students, regardless of what age they are. But yes, and particularly for the younger age range, whose future is, I suppose, why we're here today. What I'm just going to go, well, I was going to go back to the presentation, but we'd like to hear from you a little bit more. So I don't think it's worth me sharing this presentation slide just to say I'll take it off again. So for those of you on the call today, if you would like to share your name, your role, and a little bit about what brings you here today, it would be great to hear from you. So I'm going to start with Sarah. You were the first in the call, so I'm going to start with yourself.
Okay, I'm Sarah Stu. I'm the founder of a nursery company. So we have 7 trade settings. We're looking at being, I've only just joined BELMAS. We're looking at how to be more environmentally friendly. That's why I'm here.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And short and sweet, that was great. Daniel, over to you.
Hi, hello. My name is Daniel Buzotil. Currently, I am working as an administrative officer for the research and development section with the Institute for Education. We are responsible for vetting dissertations. We also analyze different teams and times of what can get passed or not. I also come from an environmental background. I have an environmental degree from fr- from MCAS, and I'm also currently pursuing a master in geosciences by research. I always have interest in environmental education. I have also a keen interest in addressing the gaps for this type of scenario and issue. Um, right right now, the instance of Malta is basically we need more of the promotion of the units, more promotion of the subjects. And now we're going to also see how the Green VT subject is also going to get implemented as well.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you very sorry.
Apologies, I talk a lot. I also came in this call because I have sheer interest in how other countries are doing such things, and I'm also taking also some notes which I can also direct them to the IFE, which we can maybe implement as well.
Okay,
Awesome.
excellent. So we're looking forward to you joining us throughout. Thank you very much. Stephen, hello.
Hi, I'm Steve Willoughby. I was a senior consultant for Hackney for a number of years, and I retired in 2010, I think. But I've been doing work for special schools, particularly on and off up till now. I obviously did I went to the Institute of Education for years, actually. I did a doctorate and finished that in 2017 about equalities policy. Later on, with Pamela Dunkley, we produced a book on teaching assistants. Now, this is one of the reasons I came here today, because one of the big issues, as far as we are concerned, is the poor control support for teaching assistants in primary schools and secondaries, for three reasons really. One, the linkage, the time for working with class teachers or in secondary schools for specialist teachers, they're not normally given time to do that. Two, that the CPD for TAs is, do they get it? Don't think so. 9 times out of 10, and particularly now. Thirdly, their pay is disgusting, actually. I'm sorry, but it is. I'm going to say it. When I go to rigs, you know jolly well I'm going to say it, because if academics and people do not actually say something about this, we'll carry on. And this is happening both at national level in terms of funding, the government, and particularly at the Commons debate a couple of years ago, agreed that they were getting their general monies were 13,000. You know, do me a favour. So this is my area, and I am now with people like Chris Brown at Southampton, looking to do another piece of research into teamwork where TAs are involved when you're doing when schools, primaries and secondaries, develop new
I think we've lost your signal there a little bit, Stephen.
I think, Stephen, we might have to just move on to our next guests.
I just want to say, I just want to say we've lost your signals.
Get the quality that they need.
So thank you very much for that, Steve. As an ex-TA, I'm glad somebody's speaking up there. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
Over to, I've got J. Morris Black. I'm sorry, there's no first name there.
Hi, sorry. Janet, I'm going to change it shortly. I'm from Jamaica. I met Deb Oswait 2 years ago at a leadership conference in Jamaica, where I presented my my master's research paper. So I'm here just for inspiration.
Good, that's what we hope to give it to you.
Applying to my PhD, to do my PhD in education leadership, and hoping to, I thought more persons would have been here, so I didn't come prepared to present. I'm sorry.
That's okay. No. It's just about you. We don't need a presentation. It's just a little bit about you. So we appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Last but not least, Rob, over to you.
Yeah, hi everybody. Rob Hyam from UCL Institute of Education. I'm a colleague of Rupert's, but even though we share a surname, we're not family.
I did ask Rupert the same question today, actually.
Okay, right, yeah. So yeah, I'm a geographer by training. So inherently I have an interest in sustainability, climate change, and sort of human geography. But my research is not currently focused on any of those issues. So I'm not really here to tell you what I've been up to, but more as an interested party. I do sort of feel a moral obligation to start thinking about sustainability, climate change, etc. And it may become part of my research in the future. But as I say, I haven't really thought it through yet in practice. So I'm interested, a bit like a prior colleague said, in engaging and thinking and hoping that membership of this SIG would sort of stimulate my own thinking.
Well, let's hope so. Let's hope so.
And
We'd be very keen for that to happen.
I just wanted to lastly say hello to Nahida, because Nahida came many years ago to the Institute and gave a lecture on metacognition and her school to some of our MA students. So thank you again, Nahida, and very nice to see you again.
Oh, that's great. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Hopefully you can. Now we've got a little bit of background to everybody, which is wonderful, and we know internationally as well, which is excellent. We couldn't wish for a better spread. In terms of where we're moving to next, we've got David, who's going to talk to us about what sustainability is. We'll all have different ideas on that. I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to hand over to David.
Okay, thanks, Marie. Yeah, I just want to talk briefly really about trying to pin down what we really mean by sustainability, because it amazes me when I'm working with groups of school leaders and talking to people generally, that it's a much bandied about word, but what does it really mean? And when I run workshops with school leaders, I ask them as part of the exercise to just think of some words or phrases that spring into their minds when they think of the word sustainability. And these are some examples. There are many more, but these are some that are from the workshop people that have given their ideas. So we've got things like, time immemorial, and apparently this was a historic term that meant any time before the Battle of Hastings, and it was bandied about an awful lot in the 13th century. And then we've got more sort of conventional phrases such as everlasting, lengthy, prolonged, lingering, extended, protracted, lasting. And the one that I like really is continue over time. And the reason I like that one, and I mean, they're all time related, is because I think we are still so short term in our outlook. We still talk about securing the planet for our children and grandchildren. And really, that's small beer when you think about the length of time Homo sapiens have trod across the world. It is really a very small amount of time. And I think we really do need to get our act together as a species, as well as if we're in leadership in whatever sector, business or education or government or whatever, we need to really think about ourselves in a different way. Otherwise, we are actually heading for doom. And I don't want to zoom to gloom too much, or zoom to doom, but I think this is a reality that we're facing, and we need to think about it in terms of the time that we would like our species in its present form to persist. So Rupert's mentioned the Holocene epoch, and that lasted about 10,000 years from the last ice age, and now they're talking about the Holocene turning into the Anthropocene. So we're altering the planet so much over the particularly last 200 years, but particularly the last sort of 50 years, that geologically speaking, you can see our mark there, and this is where we're sort of flipping things in more ways than one, not just climate, but all the other nasties that we all know about. So because we're actually causing all these changes and rapid changes in terms of the history of the Earth, then once again, I think as leaders, we need to think about this far more seriously and think about the truly longer term. Now, I'll take some of my sort of inspiration really from indigenous people. Because if you look at the, say, the indigenous Australians, I mean, they were there for 47,000 years. And they lived a good life. They respected the flora and fauna and the land. They knew about the stars in the sky, and they were very successful. But they weren't into progress. They were into sustainability. They sustained themselves for 47,000 years until white settlers came and messed it all up. So I'm not advocating that we all try and live like Australian First Nation people, but it does make you think about how short term we are at the moment, the modern us anyway. So if we can just look at the next slide, please, Marie. So if you start to think about the values that you need to think in a longer term way, then it does fit into all sorts of leadership theory and other theory, because I think most theories of leadership really put values at the heart of it, and that good leaders, so-called, they've got very strong values that they wish to impart and to live by. So I came across this model, which I really like, because it shows values at the base of everything that then influence beliefs, attitudes, opinions, and behavior. But when I've been working with groups of head teachers, the beauty of this sort of model is that you don't have to start at trying to change their values. You can actually just start to tweak behaviors a little bit. And that goes for anyone in schools or any other institution. And if the behavior starts to change, then that can alter opinions, which can lead to changing attitudes, which can then change beliefs and then form new values. So it's a nice model because it can work from whichever direction you like. But what I've always tried to do is to think, how can we influence the values of, in my case, school leaders, so that they will live those values in the way that the schools or groups of schools are run. And I think this is the challenge that we've got, because at the moment, I'm sorry to say that you see many very highly valued or people with lots of high values in schools as in positions of leadership who aren't actually helping. They're just part of the business as usual model. And they want successful schools that churn out more people who can then consume more and more. And that's how they're judged. And it does fit into the easily measurable standards scenario that we all know and love in education. So I hope that our rig can then influence that quite a lot in terms of how we look at values in terms of sustainability, because I think it's lacking at the moment with many of our leaders, which may be slightly controversial to say, but I really do think that to make a difference, we need to have people with these sorts of values. Okay, next slide, please, Marie. So this is, you'll be pleased to know I'm not going to talk through all the aspects of this particular slide, but what I do want to sort of highlight is the fact that leadership for sustainability is about a way of running an organization that is holistic and that does, as Nahida said, has got a golden thread running through it that is all about sustainability, sustainable lifestyles in the sense of social, economic, and environmental. Now, often people just rush to the green stuff and think, oh, you're a green leader if you think in this way. But it isn't just that, because it's not just the environmental, it's social justice. It's having a curriculum that is truly engaging to learners, that's experiential, that's not just all screen based. It's so there are a lot of curriculum implications to this. And there are lots of implications for how the schools are run in terms of their buildings, their campuses, their grounds. And I think, once again, people have got fixated on that, and they've started to think, well, okay, we can reduce our emissions, we can recycle a few bottles, and then we're a sustainable school. But of course, that's only part of it. And should we be having disposable bottles in the first place? All this sort of stuff can arise. And then, of course, there's the influences that the school can have on its community. And if, once again, in Nahida's case, if you've got strong links to your community, if you are a force in the community for good, which Rathfern School, Nahida School certainly is, then it means that you can spread your sort of sustainability far and wide. And it doesn't matter whether you're in a rich area or a poor area, it can benefit everyone. So it can link to things like fuel poverty, and it can link to things like pupil expectations of what they should have in terms of social justice. All these sorts of things can come into it as well. And like I was saying, the curriculum itself has got a lot of richness that can be added to it through sustainability. But that in itself has a knock-on implication of, well, how are we training our teachers then? Have we got a teaching workforce and a teaching assistant workforce and any other people who work in school? Is this workforce really up for the job in terms of promoting and developing sustainability within a school or groups of schools? So a leader for sustainability, it can actually bring all this together and can be like a conductor of an orchestra. Or another analogy might be the captain of a ship, a sailing ship. And I think that in that instance, a good leader actually does sail a ship. It doesn't drive a ship. And so I think we've got too many leaders who drive things because either their ego gets in the gets in the way in a way, and they want to drive things forward, or they don't take people with them, or they do things in a way that forces people. And what we want are sailors rather than drivers, I think, in leadership for sustainability terms. So the question that we've got at the end, it asks about whether we have got an education system fit for purpose, and it's put in a certain way that we'll reveal a bit later. But I think this is the reason that I was very keen that we formed this rig, because it seemed a gaping hole in BELMAS's operations that we needed to fill. And I think we've got great potential. We've got some great people on board who will enable us to fill that hole. So thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Over to Rupert.
You're muted, Rupert.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Sorry, I beg you. I think I clicked twice. My apologies, everyone. Marie, could I ask you to put the question slide up for us? Here we go. So yes, I'd initially planned for us to break out into groups and so that we could allow more to speak. But I think there is enough. Such are our numbers that we needn't break out to do that. So really, I think we can just invite this to the room and everyone who's here to discuss. We've mentioned a couple of times, and David just gave us more of an insight into this idea of the Holocene and the Anthropocene. And so it's really to invite for discussion now whether our education systems are now catering for a Holocene epoch in an Anthropocene world. And since I've been invited to introduce this, I might just say for a moment, the research that I've done in this area, some of which I've linked to in the chat here, is inspired philosophically by Deweyan pragmatism and that tradition, which is about a focus on doing rather than being in education. And what I take, and I think that the time and the urgency that David has described to us requires a sort of what you might call an epistemological shift, if you'll forgive the term. But instead of, for 3,000 years or more, we've been engaged in a very fruitful and interesting discussion about what good education looks like, which is linked to the notion of what the good life looks like. And that's still a very valuable conversation to have, but it's what you would call a timeless question. that assumes, if you're not careful, that everything else remains equal and that the world will continue and endure as it is. And within that stable framework, we get to do what we think is right. But in the case of the current situation where that is clearly, empirically, no longer the case, then I think we have to ask, well, what are the timely aims of education? What must education look like, aim at, do now in order for, as David said, for the merest consideration being for our grandchildren to survive and thrive on this planet, let alone those who come after. So for me, this question captures the timeliness and the of educational aims. And for me, that our education systems have not yet even begun to pay heed truly to the timeliness. And if we imagine, just as one example, in the UK, the green paper that the government issued in 2023 calling for all schools, advising that all schools have a sustainability lead by 2025, we can see that the mood music is there, but there was no statutory requirement, there was no funding, there was no need for those sustainability leads to be part of the leadership team of any school, no instruments that were declared to measure whether that is happening and the success with which it is happening and the impact that it has. And as we know, it is those sorts, within our systems it currently operates, it's those sort of instruments that provide sort of impetus that highly overworked and stressed school leaders require to change their priorities to enable them to act. So that's my initial view on this, and I'm be happy to welcome to some of our guests today to share their thoughts.
Perhaps I could just add, I don't want to hog any more time, but there are problems with calling it the Anthropocene world anyway. But I think because it lumps all humanity together in terms of being earth damaging, when in fact it's probably it is a small minority of richer people, of which we are part.
Thank you. Anyone would like to share their thought?
Yes, actually, I'd like to say a couple of things. I think that the ideas are lovely, okay, but I'm going to come from a situation where I feel that you look at primary schools, and many primary schools that I've been dealing with, the buildings are falling down. You go to a secondary school, half the secondary school, say for maths, is not working. Now, I know what you're saying, and it's very nice, but the fact of the matter is, for me, there are two major concerns. One, one of you mentioned it just now, and that's funding. We have not been having funding for proper decent funding for at least over 2010 to 2020. No one's going to argue about that. We're only just getting some money, that schools are getting a little bit of money. But if you look, for example, for teachers, schools have got to put some of that money that's not even being paid by the government. Some of it's being taken have to be found by schools. That's also, and when we don't even think about TAs, because I've said it, it is all very well, but unless we have proper funding, because I totally agree with you in terms of you want the best for students, and you want to get students' views back and working on them. But at the moment, we're looking at where you put the buckets for the water, and that's where we're at with this. And I personally, although I'm a Labour person, I'm finding that the government does not have the money to do an awful lot. We know that we're having food. Hackney was doing food for people in their borough for breakfast earlier. However, we're looking at that really. You know, are all students having decent food before they even start the lessons, which is sad. But we're down that, and how are we going to deal with roofs? So I think, I don't like to say this, but I don't think we're anywhere near this. The idea of
Stephen, I mean, I really take your point, and Nahida, I'd like to come to you in just a moment. But just to say, I think one of the messages of David's presentation in particular, we're taking, it's like we can't afford not to look at the bigger picture and think of what happens if we destroy the climate to the extent that no food can be grown. And we need to work out where the balance leads between those things. And the logic of that presentation was that we cannot just simply say, well, we'll just wait till we're better funded before we take this on. There has to be other ways to think of how one isn't dependent on the other. And I think, Nahida, probably just, you know, as a practicing head, I think you might have some ways to engage with that.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely sympathise, Stephen, with your sentiment, as Rupert does, because on the ground, and I've been ahead for 20 years, very real challenges we're facing in terms of funding, but absolutely agree that, you know, the absolute challenge for leaders is to keep our eyes on what is absolutely critically important for our communities and for the planet, and somehow navigating the complexity of that. And it's not an easy journey. But if we just get caught up in the mire of funding, it's really de-energizing. So the way I work here is that I keep campaigning for fairer funding, but I also want and feel responsible, like David said, to ensure that my children are ready for the future and that feel that sense of hope that they can shift and change things. I mean, let's face it, the political system is dire. And unless we give children hope that there's something worth fighting for, and that there is going to, you know, there are real actions, albeit tiny, at least that energizes them and gives them that sense of agency that we can make a difference. Otherwise, things can get very despondent. And I mean, I guess my take on it is that it's not a binary. So it's not sort of standard fighting for, you know, really better pay or the climate. It's navigating how you work and engage your community. And that's been a journey for me in my leadership. You know, there've been times when I've been less engaging and actually realized it's not sustainable leadership. Sustainable leadership really is working with the community, children and staff. And it's an ongoing challenge for all of us, but it's something children want to hear about, and increasingly the staff, and certainly parents are more and more feeling very worried about the rising temperatures, say in my school at the moment. You know, how are you going to keep my children cool this week? And we've got to kind of, it's wonderful they ask those questions, because then we can say, well, why are temperatures increasing? And we can, it's live risk assessing. But we haven't got all the answers, not here at RAFA, and we're still on a journey.
Don't think anybody has all the answers there, Nahida.
No.
I think that's right. I think it's a good point that I think it's the ultimate child protection issue. You can look at it just simply like that.
Yeah, and it has to be prioritized accordingly. Can I invite anyone?
Sorry, just on that, Rip, it does impact children's mental health. Children are worrying about these things that they're seeing and things happening out there. So if we avoid the conversation, we're not going to help them manage those fears and anxieties. We have a duty.
Yeah, a 2023 report across 10 countries found that 75% of young people are worried on a daily basis. I feel anxious on a daily basis about the state of our climate. And if you think about that as a backdrop to just trying to educate young people, you recognize just how immediate that problem is. Daniel, did you want to?
Yes. So the problem, I'm going to state for my country now. The problem with Malta is that many students and even people who are in schools and being enrolled in schools they do not care much about the environment. And in Malta, we have problems with water scarcity, problems problems related with waste, problems even with basically the heat urban areas, and and we need more awareness towards the curricula. So certain types of fields don't even cover anything which is environmental related, which I find absolutely bizarre because I stu- I studied in a way where I studied basic engineering, but then I applied it to sustainable practices, and and even and even like Malta is still following like the type of system. So this is something even on a global issue. What we can do is either influence the ministry to promote it even more, which they are currently doing, but I don't think they're doing enough. And also, there's even I agree with Stephen as well. Funding is a bit of a problem. Look, because when you're funding allocated to this type of things per se, it's like there are other types of priorities which come into play, and then these get easily ignored. We for the case of Malta, I think there is an increase of adopting a different like methodologies. For example, where I work at, the ways of how they teach and the ways of how they do things is a bit different from the traditional school curricula. But this is coming from a person who works in the education sector for people who are going to become future teachers, if that's related to this manner. That's how I see it.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you. I could reply, but I'd like to invite any of our other guests to see if they'd like to contribute.
I just wanted to say first, these school children are pushing us to be more environmentally aware. They're coming from the people. They're playing it this one.
Thank you. Thank you. Can I make one just brief suggestion on the just relating to what Daniel said and what Stephen said before as well? It's a sense of the degree of seriousness and urgency that we need to move away from what I'd call like an additionality mentality. Well, if only all of this were working, then we could do it. If we had a bit more money and time, we could do it. And while I completely understand that, so well, we could scrap GCSEs. And then you would get rid of a whole amount of money and time would be freed up. But we're just not yet talking radically enough about what's, that's one example. But we've got to think about what we don't need to do anymore, or what we might think is good but not urgent or essential, and be prepared to stop doing it, to make time, to free up money, to look at other things, and to enable children and adults to learn in different ways that join the dots, like you're saying, Daniel, between the very real crises around them and what's actually on the curriculum is still that doesn't, it's not seen as a problem-solving initiative.
In fact, I even conducted research where basically I was trying to address the skill gaps in monitoring, in teaching, also on the use of renewable energy technologies. Some countries are developing like rapidly, like the Western, but however, Central and Eastern, they still need to keep adapting to it, and there needs to be more promotion. There are like some increases from the countries of Poland and some other Balkan countries as well, but however, even for example, like projects like the Horizon 2020 project, um, they are trying to address this issue as well. Not exactly the issue that we're talking about, like in the breakout activity, but they're doing it indirectly.
Thank you so much. Can I ask if any of our last any last words from our guests before I think, Maria, we should probably move towards a wrap up and a quick look towards the next year.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah, perhaps we should take that time then to do so, and then if there's time at the end, we can return to any points. Shall I just outline? This is the beginning of our activity as a rig. The challenge of building momentum and energy is very real in an overcrowded policy and and practice environment. We are looking forward already towards what we hope will be a first face-to-face event in Cardiff in July June 2026, the next BELMAS conference, and our plan is to try and have something substantive by then to bring to the table to demonstrate in more than words the sorts of things that we're talking about. So, for example, one of the projects we're working with at the moment, David is working with a large group of schools in the Northeast and working with them on sustainability leadership. We are hoping to try and capture some of the data and perspectives from that project, and hopefully bring it together as research, and hopefully even try to find a way to expand it into Wales and Welsh Government before next July. That's my personal challenge, is to try and make that happen. But what we want to try and work towards actual examples of research and practice coming together to set, to be captains in this, to set sail in David's metaphor, rather than for this to be a talking shop. And I think that the BELMAS group, BELMAS is nicely positioned between research and practice in that regard, and we want to build on this research that we're currently doing that examines the barriers and the enablers for leaders to live up to the moral responsibility that they feel inside them.
Yeah, if I could just add to that as well in terms of what we're hoping to do over the coming year. After we've uploaded this launch, we will be uploading other resources as well. So please do keep an eye. If you are BELMAS members, please keep an eye on the Leadership for Sustainability RIG pages, particularly the resources. We've got a few videos from students and so on, talking about sustainability, and we've got many things to share with you on that. We're also hoping to have a blog post up and running. At the moment, we're just currently debating which way to take this, because sustainability, as we've heard, is a very slippery concept, and trying to pin it down is challenging. And we could take it many ways. So keep an eye out on the newsletters that come through from BELMAS, but also from the Leadership for Sustainability web pages too. So anything else to add? Any of my co-conveners on that?
Just one thing, Marie, and I think as I touched on it throughout my bit, is that really what we're talking about is school improvement, as Ofsted would understand it, as much as anything else. So what we don't want to be seen as is some sort of lunatic fringe that doesn't actually tap into the standards agenda, but we know that we can take it even further. And I'd like to think that in my schools we did, and certainly Nahida's school definitely does. And so it is possible, but unless you want it to happen, it won't. And that's where the values are at the core of it. So it's very difficult to say that without being a virtue signaler. But I think that's at the core of it, really. Unless we have more leaders who, from the bottom up, will sort of stick their head above the parapet, to put more mixed metaphors in, we're not going to achieve anything. And this is why we're very pleased that we've got this sort of stake in BELMAS now, where there wasn't any before.
Yeah, and I think, we can translate that across different education systems internationally as well. We look at different Ministry of Education and the different standards and things that they apply, but also across different phases of education. So schools, further education, higher education, and so on. A lot of what we're talking about is easily transferable across these different contexts.
Yeah, it's important to remember that other people do this stuff better than happens in England.
Yeah, I mean, just briefly, I mean, it'd be interesting for you guys as the SIG leaders to think about, how you're positioning the SIG in relation to what else is out there already. So, for example, the UCL Centre around climate change education. I think the approach it's taken is very much around, how do we change the curriculum and provide an offer for schools in relation to, look, if you want to teach science, this is the way you can use the national curriculum to teach kind of a sustainability, climate change thematic through science, and skill children through knowledge, essentially, to know and understand. And I think their critique of the DFE's position, although we've heard quite a lot of critiques already today on that, is that the DFE's thought more of the school estate as a place of change rather than necessarily the education of children, for example. And so I suppose it'd be interesting to know, you think about, and maybe have this idea fairly clearly already, but what is the SIG going to contribute into the existing conversation? And from David's presentation, it seems to be, potentially one thing is how you actually integrate different aspects of what a school can be achieving through educational leadership, and that is the this particular offer of the SIG, and that seems to relate to my experiences of being a governor in Stoke Newington in London, whereby it is the coordination of a whole variety of different activities. Unfortunately, often by informal leaders in the school, the activist geography teacher, for example, but also using, and I noticed, I can't remember how you termed it, David, but the sort of, was it the pushy power of students, or the
Passive power.
persuasive, or
That's the power.
but that school kind of managed to get funding for solar panels on the school, but instead of just putting up solar panels on the school, kind of interweave learning about solar panels into a variety of different curriculums, and then also had a range of extracurricular projects that came out of that, and that kind of became a bit of a virtuous cycle. So I'll be quiet now, but just how the SIG is presenting itself and what the contribution that might be really helpful in terms of, just lastly, the danger in that is that you're offering something that's really quite complicated. It's the stitching together of everything. So, just thinking about how you tread between the leadership offer, which is the stitching together of everything, of course, with the sort of offer into the existing kind of research-based practice that we all see already. I think that would be interesting to kind of carve out. And maybe that's what you mean by developing the offer on the website.
I think the leadership. I mean, what you're describing, Rob, is that's the leadership skill, isn't it? That's the leadership techniques and strategies that a good leader, whatever kind, will be employing. But if you've got the values of wanting it to be a sustainable focus, then that's the added extra, really. But you're right; it's about the skills and strategies it's about good leadership, really, when it comes down to it.
Yeah, but is it only that? Because if it was just about good leadership, then would you need a SIG on sustainability and educational leadership?
It's values. It's the values.
Good leadership. I mean, it depends on how you define good leadership, of course. But
yeah,
and I think yours
would.
Oh,
that's another slippery concept, isn't it? So, and perhaps one for another time. I'm sorry to step in here, but I do realise the time. So, Rupert, I don't know if you've got anything that you want to...
I mean, one of the slides that David couldn't share today is one where he's actually looked around all the different BELMAS rigs and started to try and make the connections between their different focus and sustainability at the heart of all of them, and that's something else that we'll share. And so again, it's at the core of it is trying to find new ways to move away from additionality. This is something else that we need to do on top, to integrality. This is something that we need to do through everything, and it improves the school and mental health and every other aspect of school and community life in the process. But it's that Gestalt switch, it's that Gestalt flip or switch that we need, and it is I think the fundamental message that we're trying to find ways to promote through this rig. But yes, we should wrap it up there, shouldn't we, Marie?
Yes,
we're few in number, but rich in thought. Thank you.
Absolutely.
And you'll hear from us soon.
Yes, thank you all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for coming, and to all our co-conveners as well.
Thank you.